Assalamu alaikum. In this session, we will focus on research process for basic and applied research. Now, as we have previously discussed, that your research starts with an observation, be it basic research or be it applied research. In case of applied research, you might observe that your organization may not be doing well. Or in other case, you might observe that your organization is really doing well. Now, in order to sustain that performance, you invest in your research, as is the case of the multinational companies that have worth over billions of dollars. Now, in case of basic research, when research is conducted to advance the existing body of knowledge or the existing research, the first step again is observation, where you identify the broad area of research that you want to conduct your research in. Now, in this case, let's divide that broad area of research into main area and sub areas as well. For instance, my interest or my area of research is human resource management. And within human resource management, I'm interested in identifying or I'm interested in working in leadership. And within leadership, you might be interested in a particular area. So leadership is obviously a very broad area of research that we want or that we are interested in. So if you are interested in conducting your basic research, so the first step is observation. So you observe what you want to study, what you want to research on. Okay, my area is leadership. I want to conduct or I want to research on leadership. Okay, good enough. So what is my first step after this? After I identify that this is the area that I want to work on, this is the area that I want to research on. So the next step is your preliminary data gathering. How do you do preliminary data gathering? So now, in order to do preliminary data gathering, you need to have preliminary data with you. If it's applied research, you mostly go for interviews as to identify what problem is existent in the organization. Now, if it's not applied research, your focus is on identifying your or collecting your preliminary data through literature surveys. So you search different databases, you search or you go through different articles to identify what literature is available in this particular field. Now, there is a video on searching research databases on my YouTube channel, so you are requested to watch that video as well to help you understand how to search through different databases. So now, the next step is literature survey. So you try to search through the literature as to what is available in the literature. So obviously, since your focus is on advancement of research or advancement of existing research, so the focus of search would be as to what is available and how can this be taken forward. So it is strongly recommended that you search latest literature in your particular area of interest, because that will tell you, okay, this is what has been done up till now. And then they have got these recommendations that help you identify, okay, this is what needs to be done in future. So for instance, how do you do preliminary data gathering? So once you have collected your literature, once you have downloaded the literature from different databases that I've already guided you on, and for further information, you can always watch those videos. Now, once you have that literature, so let's see you put that in Mendeley. We'll be discussing Mendeley soon. So you search or you put that in a folder or maybe in any software. In this case, I put that in Mendeley. So how do you use that literature? How do you work on that literature to identify, okay, what is available and what needs to be done? Now, in order to do that, let's say we've got these papers. So while I was searching through the internet, I found out that, okay, there are different leadership styles. And one of the literature I was reading through, for example, this paper maybe, and this paper showed that, okay, there is very little research in the area of servant leadership, because this research has only recently appeared in last 20 or so years. So there are very few researches in this area. There are very few papers in the area of servant leadership. So this is what I want to search in. This is what I want to work on. This is what I want to conduct my research in. So I start my preliminary literature search has already started when I found this paper on servant leadership. And I found out, okay, there is very little research. And this paper calls for future research in the area of servant leadership. And it's a very latest paper in 2019. So I start downloading the latest papers in this area. And let's say I found that, okay, these are a few papers that are available, very latest papers. So how would I identify what is the problem persistent in this particular area? In this case, with problem, we mean what are the limitations of existing research? What are the recommendation of existing research as to what needs to be done in this particular area? What are the gaps prevalent in this particular area? So your research problem statement actually flows from the limitations and gaps in existing research. So let's say I found this paper. And this was a paper published by Chughtai in 2019. And it focuses on servant leadership and perceived employability, proactive career behaviors as mediators. It was published in Leadership and Organization Development Journal. So how would I identify using this paper as to what are the limitations of existing research? How would I identify based on this paper or these papers as to what problems are prevalent in existing research? Now, there is a very simple way to do it. First thing, that you look into the originality and value of this research. So according to this research, this is the first study which has empirically established a link between servant leadership and perceived employability. So a paper published in 2019 claims that this is the first study that has actually looked into servant leadership and employability. So what you could focus on is that there might be other variables relevant to employability, or there might be other papers that have not studied the impact of servant leadership on a particular outcome. So you may search those databases by using this term like servant leadership and a particular variable of your interest. For instance, say project success. So you do not find any research on servant leadership and project success. So now you can focus on this particular area, because this is a problem in existing research. There is no research available in this area. And furthermore, maybe you can involve certain mediators in this research. Servant leadership, impact on project success, and maybe in the mediating role of conflict management. Because in organizations or in project management organization, conflict is a very important area, and there are loads of conflicts that keep happening. For example, there could be process conflict, there could be task conflict, there could be relationship conflict. So you search those databases and try to find out whether there is research in this particular area. And if you can't find it, well, that's your area for research. That's the problem that you want to solve. But this is something we called implicit gaps, something that you have to search for. But there are times when existing research or latest papers actually tell you or guide you that this is what future research, or this is what a future researcher should do. So now, how do you do this? So in order to do this, what we do is, apart from this, I would like to show you something more. Okay. Okay, let's go to, okay, this is the model that they have studied. So servant leadership with some mediators and perceived employability. Now, how would I know that how to take this research forward, or how to take the existing research forward in case of servant leadership? So if I go down, and in every good paper, you will find a section on future research directions. Here it is, limitations and future research directions. Now, if we go through this whole lot, we cannot read through whole lot, but what is our area of interest, or what is our interest is that what mediators, what outcomes can we further study in future research. There might be other suggestions as to improve the sample size, improve the sampling technique, and maybe take this model and study it in any other organization or in any other sector. But to the best of my knowledge, these are weaker gaps. A stronger gap is when you check the relationship between variables, and those variables or those relationships haven't been checked previously. Now, in this case, this paper, very latest paper published very recently, this shows that the present study focused on examining the mediating role of proactive career behaviors in servant leadership perceived employability relationship. Now, they actually assess the mediating role of career behaviors. However, in order to acquire further insights into this relationship, future research can attempt to uncover other mediating variables. Now, it's calling for you to identify other mediating variables between servant leadership and perceived employability. Now, how do you do this? When you do not know, because when you do not have an actual research as to how servant leadership influences the behaviors. Now, but you do have research on other leadership styles, maybe transformational leadership style, maybe charismatic leadership style, maybe entrepreneurial leadership style. Now, in that particular case, what you can do is you can see what other leadership styles have been evaluated in existing research, and how maybe, for example, transformational leadership style have influenced maybe say knowledge related variable, maybe knowledge sharing, or maybe an individual's ability to uh, say focus on any other variable. So, and then you have to evaluate how that particular variable could influence perceived employability. Now, in order to add a mediating variable, it has to have relationship with both independent and dependent variable. Now, you should be able to prove. So if you want to take a particular mediator, you should be able to prove that how this variable is influenced by the independent variable, in this case, servant leadership, and how this particular mediator will influence the dependent variable, in this case, perceived employability. So whenever you are searching for new mediators, this is an important condition that one should understand. Because in mediation, what you are looking for is X influences Y and Y influences Z. So Y is in relationship with both the variables. So whenever you are looking for a mediator, this is how you do it. So in order to identify the problems, the limitations, the gaps in existing research, this is one way to do it. Let's see another paper as well. For example, let's say this paper. Now, this paper focuses on determining the antecedents and the outcomes of servant leadership. Now, let's see if they have got any recommendations for future research as to how research on servant leadership can be moved forward or taken forward. So if we go on, okay, this is their model. This is servant leadership on which they are focused, and then these are the antecedents, and then afterwards these are the outcomes. So if we go to limitations and future research directions, so let's see if we get anything of interest here. Now, as to how to enhance this particular model. Now, they have focused on the methodological limitations as to have cross-sectional research, multi-source approach in data collection, uh, increasing the number of industries. Now, this is what we are interested in. Future research should expand the number of antecedents by including other self-concept variables such as self-esteem, positive and negative affectivity, and other personality variables. So what you can do is you can have servant leadership in your research, and as an antecedent, something that influences servant leadership, you can have self-esteem, you can have positive and negative affectivity, and maybe other personality variables. For example, if somebody is introvert, how does this affect his servant leadership behaviors? If somebody has or is extrovert, how does that affect his personality, his servant leadership behaviors? So you can look into the personality models in organizational behavior research and see what different types of personality are there in research or in literature, and how they could influence the servant leadership or servant leadership behaviors of people within the organization. Now, furthermore, if you look into this model should also be expanded to include other work attitudes such as organizational commitment, employee engagement, and job involvement. So you could look into the impact of servant leadership into these variables. So now this is how you develop your own model. So what you can do is you can obviously add these variables or use these variables. For example, you can have servant leadership here, and then how, for example, self-esteem influences your servant leadership, how maybe personality influences your servant leadership, and how servant leadership later affects your or employees' organizational commitment, their employee engagement, and their job involvement. Now here it is. This is your model. This is your research model. This is what you need to research on, or this is what you can research on. So this is how your research can work. Now this is how, what I've done is I've just searched through existing literature and I've developed my own model. So this is what, or this is how you search through existing literature, you go through existing literature and you find out the problems, the limitations, the gaps in existing research. But it is strongly recommended that you only go for latest research. So now moving on. So the next step is you define your problems. So how you define your problem, we'll be discussing this in little detail in our coming slides. The next step is you present as to how your variables are related. This is your theoretical framework. And it involves a schematic diagram as well. You describe as to how the variables, or what are the variables in your study and how they are related. Followed by this is the generation of hypothesis, an explicit, concrete, clear, testable, predictable statement explaining the relationship between variables. Followed by that, your research design. How would you establish these relationships? What will be your source of data collection? How would you collect the data? What measures will you use? How will you analyze your data in your study? So once you are through your research design, you have established a map for your research. The next step is collection of data, analyzing the data, interpreting the data. And once you interpret, you do deduction, whether your hypotheses were substantiated, supported, or rejected, and whether your research questions were answered or not. And then you start writing your report, present your report, and then leave it for the managers to make decision. In basic research, there is no managerial decision, but in applied research, obviously there is a managerial decision. So this is a concise summary of your research process, in which we looked into detail as to how will you search existing literature to identify the gaps. Now the next step is the problem definition. And so, okay, we have done the preliminary literature search, existing literature, how to search existing literature, then how do you devise or identify the problems in existing research, and based on that, how do you propose your own model maybe. Now, the next step is problem definition. So problem definition or problem statement, as is also often referred to as, is a clear, precise, succinct statement of the question or issue that is to be investigated. What do you want to investigate? What is the problem that you are looking to solve? What are those answers that you're looking to get? So the problem could be maybe existing business problems where a manager is looking for a solution, that is applied research. But in case of basic research, what you are doing is you are looking into existing research as to what limitations are pertinent in existing research. What are the gaps in existing research? What needs to be done with existing research? How could the existing research be enhanced? So once you do this, and since now you have done this, now you have identified, okay, these were the gaps pertinent to servant leadership. And this is how I would enhance the existing research. You start drafting your problem statement. Now, a simple problem statement could be, to what extent do the structure of the organization and type of information systems installed account for the variance in the perceived effectiveness of managerial decision making? Or maybe the third one, this one, how has the new packaging affected the sales of the product? These are simple problem statements or well-defined problem statement. They are clear, they are concise, and they actually narrate the objective as to what needs to be done. Now, problem statement, research objectives, and research question. After reading into the literature, the researcher now can narrow down the problem from an original broad. The question problem does not necessarily mean that there's something seriously wrong. Obviously, there are gaps in research, you just need to fill them. So the problem, the question could indicate an interest in an issue. For instance, I was interested in servant leadership, and then finding out how these or how servant leadership is affected by certain variable and how it leads to certain variables. Now, scientific research starts with a definite aim or purpose. To find solution for identified problem, a problem statement that includes the general objective and research question of the research should be developed. Now, the first thing is in research, once you identify your problem, it has to include a general objective and research question. Now, how do you do it? We'll look in maybe a minute. Now, gathering initial information about the factors that are possibly related to the problem will help us narrow the broad problem area. And this is what we did. We looked into what information is available, what latest research was conducted. And based on that, we identified, okay, there is a need to conduct research on mediation analysis or mediators, or there is a need to research on how a particular variable influences or is being influenced. So now we have narrowed it down. What we are looking is, okay, these are the variables we are looking into. This is what we want to solve. This is what we want to research on. So now the next step is your problem statement. What's the anatomy of your problem statement? What are the things that may be included in your problem statement? Now, to identify the key terms in your problem statement, look for the subjects. For example, in this case, our subject was, let's say in my study, or in this case, for example, our subjects or our area or our variables were servant leadership, career satisfaction, and life satisfaction. I was interested in looking into the impact of servant leadership on career and life satisfaction. So what are the verbs? It's impact and mediating. And what are the objects? Where do you want to conduct your research? What sector do you want to analyze? It's higher education institution. So now you have refined your topic based on existing literature or research from existing literature. Now, how do you develop your problem statement based on the variables identified, based on the rough diagram, rough framework that you have identified? Okay, this is my area of research. This is what I want to work on. So this is what you do. In this case, in this example, we had career satisfaction, servant leadership, career satisfaction, and life satisfaction. So my problem statement is determine the extent to which career satisfaction mediates the relationship between servant leadership and life satisfaction. This is very clear statement. I'm interested in identifying the mechanism of impact of servant leadership on life satisfaction through career satisfaction. So career satisfaction is my mediator. Now using this problem statement, now I am devising my research questions. Research objectives. So my first objective is to identify the impact of servant leadership on life satisfaction. My second objective is to investigate the effect of servant leadership on career satisfaction. So in the first objective, I'm looking at the impact of independent variable on dependent variable. In the second objective, I'm looking into the impact of independent variable on mediating variable. In the third objective, I'm looking into the impact of mediating variable on dependent variable to ascertain the impact of career satisfaction on life satisfaction. Now, if you see, and the last one, to assess the mediating role of career satisfaction on the linkage between servant leadership and life satisfaction. Now, if you see, what I've done is I've actually broken down the problem statement into the objectives. And similarly, the objectives have been changed into the question form. Does servant leadership affect life satisfaction? And same for the other three objectives. So once you answer these questions, you achieve your objectives. And once you achieve your objectives, you actually solve your problem. Now, how do you answer these questions? How do you achieve these questions? And how do these problems are solved? Obviously, there is a whole research process which we just discussed briefly. So we'll be focusing on these things soon, and we'll be discussing further as to how you further elaborate on this problem, write about this problem, justify this problem in a research introduction. So we'll be focusing on these things pretty soon.